In the quiet streets of Wolverhampton, a city home to over 260,000 people in the United Kingdom, lived a boy named Ronan Konda. Born in November of 2005 at New Cross Hospital, Ronan grew up as the second child to his parents Chanda and Pooja, joining his older sister Nikita in their family home. The soft evening light of June 2022 would mark a profound change for this family, in a story that reminds us how fragile our connections can be. Ronan attended Lanesfield Primary School before continuing his education at Khalsa Academy, Wolverhampton. His parents had separated in 2012 and divorced 5 years later, though Chanda would later mention that it was Ronan who had been instrumental in bringing them back together again. Those who knew him described Ronan as someone with exceptional kindness. Nikita often said she had never come across someone so caring, so loving, so bright, and so popular, adding that her little brother had a massive heart. This compassionate nature was evident in how Ronan interacted with the world around him. If he noticed someone struggling on the street, he would always offer money and treat them with kindness and respect. The 16-year-old was considered the heart and soul of his family. He possessed a wonderful sense of humor, often playing pranks and practical jokes on those around him. Like many his age, Ronan enjoyed simple pleasures. He was a devoted Liverpool Football Club supporter, loved watching Netflix shows, and spent hours playing on his PlayStation. He would sit quietly for long periods drawing anime characters and was so comfortable at home that his friends would sometimes have to encourage him to venture outside. On the 29th of June 2022, the summer sun shone brightly over Wolverhampton. Just 5 days earlier, Ronan had completed his GCSE exams and was preparing to begin an exciting new chapter in his life. He had plans to study sociology, psychology, and law at A-level, with aspirations of one day becoming a lawyer. Adding to his excitement was the anticipation of his family's first holiday outside the United Kingdom. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, Chanda drove Ronan and his friends to the Midland Snooker Club on Oxford Street in Bilston. This was a familiar place for Ronan, somewhere he had been visiting with his family since childhood, where they would also enjoy meals together. Before they left, Pooja gave her son a kiss, told him he looked handsome, and waved goodbye as they departed. Later that evening, at approximately 7:30, Ronan called his father, asking for a ride home. After returning to his house on Mount Road, Ronan went out again to purchase a PlayStation controller from a friend. His father called offering to pick him up, but Ronan declined, saying he would walk home instead. Putting his headphones on and starting his music, he began his journey back. At 8:56 that evening, Chanda's phone rang. It was Pooja, who had been attending her weekly meditation class in Wolverhampton City Center. She asked him about the situation on Mount Road after hearing that it had been closed off and police had gathered in the area. Chandu went outside to discover neighbors collecting on the street surrounded by police and emergency services. Someone told him that a person had been stabbed. He attempted to call Ronan more than 10 times, but each call rang without answer and went to voicemail. He approached a police officer at the scene to inform them that his son had not returned home. The officers showed Pooja a photograph of Ronan, and one of the paramedics confirmed they were treating someone who resembled him. In a moment that would forever alter the family's life, 16-year-old Ronan Konda passed away at the scene just 2 doors from his home. Chanda was inconsolable, requiring neighbors to comfort him. Pooja was shattered by the news, as was Nikita, who was away on holiday in Crete at the time. There were police tapes there, Chanda would later recall. They wouldn't let me pass the police tape. They said it's an Asian child, Indian ethnicity. I saw that blue tent, and then when the paramedic said sorry, the detective said to me, I said, look, tell me the truth, because they said, we're working on somebody. And again, I thought, okay, they're working on him, he's going to survive. You don't expect your child just to go down the road, and this to happen to your child, especially your child who has done nothing wrong to anybody in his whole life. It hurts. It hurts. Ronan wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time, his father continued. He was just 4 doors away from his house. 5 seconds, or maybe 10 more steps, he would have been home. 10 more steps, my child would have been home. And the first time we saw him at the mortuary, Chanda remembered Nikita just staring at her brother, just staring at him, and all she screams is, "Wake up!" I'm looking at him, and his mother. The first thing she says is, "Oh, my son's cold. I need to warm him up." She couldn't hold him properly, hold his hand. A murder investigation was quietly launched. Among the first steps taken by police was reviewing the network of CCTV cameras in the area to reconstruct what had happened in Ronan's final moments. This provided their first significant breakthrough. The footage revealed 2 males, one brandishing a ninja sword and the other a machete running toward where Ronan had been. The cameras also captured Ronan's scream as he was stabbed. As investigators continued analyzing the footage, a young man named Sukhman Shergill turned himself into the police after confessing to his mother and uncle about his involvement. He could be seen in the footage alongside another individual named Prajit Vidisa. Both were arrested. Additionally, authorities detained 20-year-old Josiah Francis and 18-year-old Joseph Whitaker in connection with the case. Prabjit and Sukhman were charged with murder on a joint enterprise basis, a legal concept meaning someone could be charged with another person's crime if they foresaw the other person was likely to commit that offense. They denied the murder charge but admitted to carrying a bladed article. Josiah Francis and Joseph Whitaker were also charged with carrying a bladed article and murder charges, which both denied. Whoa. Within the first 12 hours, we'd identified the vehicle the offenders had arrived in, noted one of the investigating officers. So, we made our first arrest overnight, and within the first 48 hours, we'd made the arrest of the main perpetrator. They've been hit by an absolutely tragic incident. Their boy literally just going out to buy a PlayStation controller, and he doesn't return home. It happened so close to the home address, which meant that they couldn't get away from what had happened. Ronan's family, receiving support from specially trained officers, released a statement. Ronan was a kind-hearted, loving, caring 16-year-old, our son, and a brother who would do anything for anyone. He was a funny character who made everyone laugh around him. He is taken from us cruelly, and our hearts are broken. We want everyone to pray for his soul now. We will always love you, our son, and my brother, and you will live within us. The question everyone wanted answered was why Ronan, who had no enemies, had been targeted in such a manner. Prabjit Videsa from Walsall and Sukhman Shergill from nearby Willenhall were both 16 years old and had attended school with Ronan. They had been involved in a disagreement with one of Ronan's friends over an alleged unpaid debt, an issue that had extended into school and resulted in a physical altercation. As police examined the CCTV footage more thoroughly, they discovered increasingly incriminating evidence. On the day of Ronan's death, Prabjit had visited the local post office to collect a machete and ninja sword he had purchased online. He had used his mother's identification to buy them, and at the post office he simply provided his name and received the parcels without any verification of his age. The staff merely looked at him and assumed he was older than 25. This particular delivery was just one of nearly 30 weapons he had acquired online over the preceding months, which he would then sell to schoolmates. After visiting the post office, Prabjit had conspired with Sukhman Josiah and Joseph. They planned to confront Ronan's friend and intimidate him into repaying the alleged debt. Given the weapons Prabjit had brought, there was clear potential for violence. The four individuals entered a red Vauxhall Corsa driven by Josiah with Joseph in the passenger seat and Sukhman and Prabjit seated in the back. Shortly before 8:30 that evening, Ronan was approaching his home. The Corsa had been parked on Beach Avenue, and Prabjit and Sukhman exited the vehicle. They were observed running toward Mount Road at 8:34 p.m., where they pursued Ronan and attacked him from behind. He was stabbed twice, once in his side and once in his chest, with one wound piercing his heart. One stab wound extended 20 centimeters into his body and the other 17 centimeters. Prabjit had delivered these fatal injuries. Sukhman had brandished his weapon, but not used it. As Ronan cried out in pain, the attackers realized they had not targeted their intended victim. It was a case of mistaken identity. They fled down the street, returned to the car, and abandoned Ronan as he lay dying. The vehicle then departed, heading toward Birmingham New Road. It later emerged that they had seen Ronan leaving the house where their intended target lived and mistakenly assumed he was the person they were seeking. Following these events, the case proceeded to trial. Prosecutor David Mason, KC, described the significant planning involved and noted that both Prabjit and Sukhman had discarded their black clothes, face coverings, and weapons after Ronan was stabbed. Ronan had absolutely no chance whatsoever when he was stabbed. He stated, adding he was not the intended victim. That fact makes this case even more tragic than other cases of this type. This was a brutal killing in broad daylight in a residential street in front of members of the public. We all have an imagination as humans, Chanda reflected, and I still play that in my head. I can't sleep because I just see my boy, what they did to him, and I was only a few doors away, and this was happening to him, and it's heartbreaking, what he had to go through. And these cowards, what they did, it's absolutely cowardly, the attack, and then no care, no compassion. It is awful. Both Prabjit and Sukhman testified during the trial, confirming that Ronan was not their intended target. They claimed they had merely wanted to frighten the boy they believed owed them money. Prabjit stated that the stabbing had been accidental and that he had only intended to poke around with the sword he was carrying. He said he didn't realize Ronan had been struck until the second stabbing. The prosecution challenged this account, saying, "I would suggest you don't accidentally stab someone 20 centimeters and then 17 centimeters, do you? You intended to stab that young boy, didn't you? I would suggest it must have been screamingly obvious after you inflicted that first 20-centimeter wound to his abdomen that you had done it. You must have felt it happen, didn't you?" Prabjit denied these assertions. He also disputed claims that he was fascinated with knives, though he admitted to using false identification to purchase them for resale. Sukhman expressed sadness and anger upon learning about the attack on Ronan and maintained that he had not been involved together with Prabjit. The prosecution noted there is no real evidence of any true remorse. Senior Crown Prosecutor Samantha Dixon described the attack on Ronan as a horrifying act of violence and an act of cowardice. Adam Morgan Prabjit's lawyer said his client was genuinely remorseful. It is something he will have to bear for the rest of his life. Timothy Hannon Casey, who represented Sukhman, emphasized, "This was a joint enterprise offense, but a distinction can be drawn between the two defendants. Mr. Videsa was the one who actually killed Ronan. Mr. Videsa was the one who stabbed him, not Mr. Shergill." The trial continued for 5 weeks. After 2 hours of deliberations, the jury delivered their verdict. Both Joseph Whitaker and Josiah Francis, who had been in the car that day, were acquitted of all charges at Wolverhampton Crown Court. Prabjit Videsa and Sukhman Shergill were found guilty of murder and determined to have acted in joint enterprise in the killing. Before sentencing, Mr. Justice Chowdhury lifted the restrictions that had surrounded the case due to the defendants' ages, allowing Prabjit and Sukhman to be named in the press for the first time. Ronan's family sat quietly in the gallery wearing shirts with "Justice for Ronan" printed on them. Ronan's mother, Pooja, addressed the courtroom, sharing how she had replayed her final moments with her son repeatedly in her mind. Speaking directly to his killer, she said, "If there is a God, they will show you the real justice my son deserves." Mr. Justice Chowdhury's sentencing remarks were televised, marking the first occasion this had happened at Wolverhampton Crown Court. "Prabjit Videsa, Sukhman Shergill, you have both been found guilty of the murder of Ronan Kenda," began Justice Chowdhury. "You've also both pleaded guilty to the offense of possessing a bladed article, namely a knife in a public place. I must now sentence you for those offenses. The devastation caused by that cowardly act of running up behind him and stabbing him not once but twice is hard to comprehend. No term of years will seem a sufficient punishment to the family for your crime. No term of years will begin to compensate the family for their loss. This case is another instance of the national scourge of knife crime," he continued, "as a result of which young lives are brutally cut short because of the ease with which lethal weapons can be obtained and used on our streets. Your actions have also ruined your own lives and that of your own families, although, of course, you still have your own lives. You have both expressed some remorse. However, you both appear not to be ready to accept full responsibility for your actions. That is consistent with your young age and your current level of maturity. Perhaps as you mature and reflect on what you have done during your time in custody, you will come to fully accept your responsibility for what has occurred. Prabjit Videsa, for the murder of Ronan Kanda, I sentence you to detention for life at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 18 years. Sukhman Shergill, for the murder of Ronan Kanda, I sentence you to detention for life at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 16 years. It's important to emphasize so that you and all those who are listening and viewing this sentence can understand the position that the minimum term is just that, a minimum period which cannot be reduced in any way. After your respective minimum terms are served, there is no guarantee that you will be released at that time or at any particular time thereafter. It is only if the parole board decides that you are no longer a danger to society and fit to be released that you will be released. That will not be before you have served every day of your minimum term. That concludes my sentence. Detective Inspector A. George, who led the investigation into Ronan's murder, remarked, following the sentencing, The pain of losing a child is immeasurable, but to also know that he was not the intended target adds a whole new layer of grief, and I cannot begin to imagine the sorrow Ronan's family feel. The justice system does need to introduce tougher sentences, Chanda reflected, because to me, okay, they were 16 at the time, and he took that into consideration, their age. But to me, I think the legal system needs to change because knife crime is just an epidemic in this country. It's going to continue, and the deterrents are not there. The sentencings need to be tougher. The law needs to get tougher. And in general, I think we need to do something in this country to tackle knife crime because it's a massive, massive problem. And these people were buying these weapons using aliases, other names, parents, whatever. And it was so easy for them to get. And the worst thing was, when Prabjit Videsa went to collect his weapon on that day, he wasn't even asked for ID, nothing. He just went there, got his package, and just walked out. And I'm thinking how easy it is, This is not justice to me, Pooja expressed. 16 years for the murder of a 16-year-old by 16-year-old children. This is not good enough. It is not good enough by the law. I do think, yes, we do need to do something much stronger, much bigger in order to stop this nonsense. Because youth crime is everywhere. It's everywhere recently. I'm sick of listening to it. I'm sick of listening to other mothers losing their children as well. We are arranging marches. This is our campaign. We want to tell everybody what a beautiful, beautiful boy Ronan Kanda was. 1 year after Ronan's murder, a quiet vigil was held in his memory. Approximately 70 people gathered on Mount Road, where dubs were released and poems were read aloud. His family also initiated a fundraising campaign for Save the Children to assist families in Yemen, a fitting tribute for someone with such a kind heart. He made me the happiest mother on this earth, Pooja shared softly. He did. He helped me with everything during his 16 years, gave me so much love that I'm trying to live with the love now. Later, it was announced that the Kanda family would travel to Parliament to advocate for stronger action against knife crime. Wolverhampton Southeast MP Pat McFadden arranged for them to meet with the Minister of State for Crime Policing and Fire, Chris Phillip, and the Shadow Minister Sarah Jones. Pat McFadden, who had been working closely with Ronan's family, expressed hope that their visit would convince members of Parliament that action is needed to prevent more young people from losing their lives to knife violence. The government subsequently introduced a list of weapons to be banned, though the ones used in Ronan's murder were not included. Pooja later criticized Chris Phillips, saying, "This year I met with the Minister for Crime. He requested more information on the weapon used to murder my son to ensure it would be included in the ban. But here we are." This was the opportunity for the government to take real action and show empathy for thousands of families like ours, but they've completely missed it. When I saw for the first time the size of the sword, Pooja continued, I fainted in grief. Nikita added, "We need to do more to stop knife crime. You know how easy it is to acquire a knife. You can just go online and you can buy a machete. I want to call out the MPs. I want to call out the Prime Minister. I want to call out society and say that we need to do more to ensure that not another innocent life gets taken from knife crime." Pooja also wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister calling for online sales of knives, swords, and machetes to be prohibited. The advocacy work that Ronan's family has undertaken to address knife crime is inspiring, as is their strength and resilience in the time since his passing. His family continues to work for changes in laws and communities for the better. Speaking directly to those who carry knives, Pooja offered these thoughtful words. Going to prison isn't some pride and joy. You are going to ruin your life, your family's life. You will have to live with the guilt for the rest of your life knowing you've killed someone. So stop now before it's too late. Don't pick up the knife. If you have a fight, talk it over, but don't pick up the knife. There are no winners in a case like this. Ronan Kanda should still be here pursuing his A-levels and embracing adulthood. Knife crime has claimed far too many lives and affected too many families. While positive steps are being taken in communities such as knife surrender schemes and amnesty bins where people can safely dispose of weapons, much more remains to be done to end knife violence. We've all lost the happiness his family shared. We just feel like every day we're existing. This totally destroys. This totally destroys. The profound impact of Ronan Kanda's loss is perhaps best expressed by his mother Pooja. I miss his laughter. I miss him asking me what's for dinner. I miss hugging him. I have nothing left. It's killing me to think of what happened to Ronan. I can't believe my baby went through this alone. He was my son, my baby. And for his older sister, Nikita, life will never be the same. She said simply, I've never loved anyone as much as I love him. In the quiet streets of Wolverhampton, the memory of Ronan Kanda continues, a gentle reminder of a life that touched many others through kindness and compassion. In the quiet town of Rugby, Warwickshire, England, a place known for being the birthplace of the sport that shares its name, a community of nearly 80,000 people went about their daily lives. Among them was Louise Porton, a young mother of two little girls who in early 2018 would become the focus of a deeply troubling investigation. Louise was 23 years old when our story takes place. A few years earlier, when she turned 18, she had given birth to her first child with Chris Draper, a little girl named Lexi. Not long after, Lexi became a big sister when Louise had a second daughter named Scarlett. Though Chris was Scarlett's father as well, the relationship between him and Louise had deteriorated, and she moved to Rugby from Willenhall, effectively cutting off Chris's access to his children. The transition left Chris unable to even meet his younger daughter Scarlett. Louise, meanwhile, told her new partner that he was Scarlett's father, which was not the case. This relationship, too, would eventually come to an end, leaving Louise as a single mother with two young children. Being a young single parent presents challenges at the best of times. Louise received considerable help from her sister and other family members in caring for her daughters. She lived with Lexi and Scarlett in a flat at Beechwood Court and supported herself by working part-time as a model. On various social networking sites, Louise described herself as easy to get along with and open to all types of photo shoots, noting she was available for both paid work and trade arrangements. Using the name Lollipop, she participated in various modeling work, including erotic and glamour photography. Louise also supplemented her income through encounters with men. She appeared to prioritize these interactions over her responsibilities as a parent. In one instance, she told a man they could be intimate in the room she shared with her children, provided they remained quiet. On another occasion, she left her flat while her children slept unsupervised to meet a man in his vehicle. As 2017 drew to a close and the new year began, a series of events would unfold that would forever change the lives of those involved. On January 2nd, 2018, Louise's older daughter, Lexi, was admitted to hospital with breathing difficulties. After examination, doctors concluded that her symptoms were likely the result of a chest infection. She was discharged 2 days later on January 4th. That same day, paramedics were called to Park Road as Lexi's condition had rapidly deteriorated. Paramedic David Woods Thomas was among those who responded. He later recalled that he had no clear understanding of why the child was as severely ill as she appeared to be. Lexi was lying flat on her back, and the paramedics' quick intervention saved her life through resuscitation. After conducting their assessment, the paramedics believed her condition might be the result of a severe respiratory illness and described her condition as critical. Louise explained that her daughter had been experiencing seizures. David noted something peculiar. While Louise showed some distress, she did not display the level of concern one might expect from a parent whose child was so seriously unwell. The medical team once again diagnosed Lexi with a chest infection and prescribed additional antibiotics. When she was well enough, Lexi was discharged from the hospital on January 15th, 2018. That very same evening, at approximately 12:40 a.m., Louise called the ambulance service. "Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?" the operator asked. "No, they're not breathing," Louise responded. "Okay, and who was it we're talking about?" "Lexi, she's three. "Okay, so she's unconscious and she's not breathing, so help has been arranged." Paramedics arrived at the flat just 9 minutes after the call was placed. The property felt noticeably cold. Mark Mitchell, one of the paramedics on duty, announced their arrival as they entered. Louise called out, "In here," from the bedroom, and the medical team proceeded in that direction. They found Lexi on the floor beside the bed. Louise explained that she had given Lexi a bath earlier and then found her unresponsive in bed. Mark attempted to open her airway, but her jaw was stiff, as were other parts of her body. Rigor mortis had begun to set in. Her skin was pale and mottled, and her lips had turned blue. Mark recognized that resuscitation efforts would be futile. At 12:50 a.m., he officially pronounced Lexi's time of death, explaining to Louise that her daughter had passed away and had likely been deceased for some time already. Louise began to cry, but Mark later recalled that her tears lasted for less than a minute before she walked out of the bedroom. The paramedics wrapped Lexi in blankets, and Mark carried her to the ambulance. She was transported to University Hospital in Coventry with Louise, another paramedic, and a police officer accompanying her. Following standard procedure for unexpected deaths in children, an investigation was initiated to determine the cause. A post-mortem examination was conducted, and specialist doctors were consulted to try to understand why Lexi had died. No natural cause could be immediately identified, and the results of the post-mortem were pending. CCTV footage had captured Lexi entering the flat with Louise and Scarlett just hours before her death. In the recording, the little girl appeared happy and talkative. The loss of a child is an unfathomable pain, yet Louise's behavior in the aftermath raised questions among those who observed her. Just 1 day after Lexi had died, Louise was active on the dating app Meet Me and had accepted 41 friend requests. She was also messaging various men on another app called Badoo. In one exchange, she told a man, "My little girl passed away yesterday," and when he offered his condolences, she simply replied, "It's all right." She had even arranged to meet another man that evening. Her manner when discussing Lexi's death struck many as unusually detached. When she arrived at the funeral home to make arrangements for Lexi's service, she did not present as someone recently bereaved. Staff overheard her laughing and joking, and at one point, she was seen video chatting with a man while there. As investigations into Lexi's death continued, Louise and her younger daughter, Scarlett, were relocated to a nearby hotel. Just 2 days after visiting the funeral home for Lexi, and less than 3 weeks after the first child had died, another emergency call would be made. On February 1st, 2018, Louise had been driving around Rugby. Her car captured on CCTV on Barbie Road, Dunchurch Road, and Russelsheim Way. She stopped at a petrol station to refuel her vehicle. She then pulled into Elliott Retail Park and called 111, the UK's non-emergency medical line. She explained that she was in her car and that Scarlett, who was in her car seat, was not breathing. The operator asked if she could wake her, and Louise said she could not. She stated that she had chosen to call the non-emergency line rather than emergency services because her daughter's condition did not seem urgent, despite the fact that she wasn't breathing. When paramedics arrived and examined Scarlett, they confronted a heartbreaking scene. The baby was already deceased and had been for some time. One of the medical responders noted that Scarlett was cold to the touch and completely lifeless. When asked what had happened, Louise explained that Scarlett had been diagnosed with the flu and mentioned that her older sister Lexi had died 2 weeks earlier. Both of Louise's daughters were now gone, having died within less than 3 weeks of each other. Those who interacted with Louise after Scarlett's passing described her as emotionless and calm, given the circumstances. She did not appear distressed or upset. Her demeanor remained detached when asked about what she wanted to do with her daughter's belongings. Her response was to yawn. With both children having died under similar circumstances, medical professionals grew concerned. Doctors could find no natural explanation for either child's death, let alone both. The coincidence seemed too improbable to be natural. Social media posts by Louise's mother, Sharon, revealed that their relationship had become strained and occasionally violent. On March 11, 2018, Sharon wrote, "I really miss you so much, but being called a liar hurts me more than my own daughter. Punching me last night and knocking me on the floor, then telling me I'm no mother of hers. Thanks, Lou. All I've done since my grandkids passed is stick up for you. So thanks for hitting me. I've always been there for you and never ever said a bad word about you. So thanks for the punch to my head last night for sticking up for you. But no more. You've really hurt your own mom. So thanks, Lou." 9 days after this post, a significant development occurred in the case. On March 20th, 2018, Louise Porton was arrested on suspicion of murdering both her children. The results from the post-mortem examinations had confirmed what many had feared. Both girls had died from airway obstruction consistent with suffocation. Lexi and Scarlett were both found to have prior injuries, suggesting they may have been physically harmed before their deaths. Baby Scarlett showed signs of previous airway obstruction, and there was evidence of bleeding in her neck tissue, indicating significant pressure had been applied to her airway. The news was deeply disturbing. Louise had one previous conviction when she was 15 years old for wasting police time, but nothing else on her record. She denied any wrongdoing and claimed she had no idea why her children had died. However, investigators found her account inconsistent with the evidence, which increasingly suggested the deaths were neither accidental nor coincidental. Louise was initially released as investigations continued. After her arrest, Sharon took to social media to respond to allegations that she had been aware of her daughter's actions, insisting that people were spreading lies about her and that she knew nothing about what was happening. On March 28, 2018, Louise returned to social media herself. She changed her profile picture on Facebook and added the caption, "Smile and the haters." 3 months after her arrest, she attempted to sell bags of her deceased daughter's clothes for just $20 on Facebook. In June 2018, 9 months after the deaths of her daughters, she wrote on Facebook, "Mommy's angels, taken from me too soon. You will never be forgotten. R.I.P." She continued to maintain her innocence. Meanwhile, the police worked diligently to build their case, and the evidence they uncovered painted a troubling picture. Louise's former landlady from the property she had lived in at Willenhall from August 2016 to early November 2017 told investigators that Louise rarely had her children with her, doing whatever she could to avoid having them in her care. The landlady reported that Louise would often become frustrated and irritable with her children, swearing at them when they cried or didn't follow her instructions. She would tell them to shut the fuck up, or that she would give them something to cry for. On one occasion, when Lexi had a tantrum, her mother pulled her up by one arm and told her, "Get the fuck up from the floor." The medical evidence surrounding the deaths revealed that when Lexi had first been admitted to hospital, her symptoms were consistent with deliberate airway obstruction rather than a chest infection as initially diagnosed. While Lexi was hospitalized, Louise had gone to the restroom and taken sexually suggestive photographs of herself. She had also messaged a photographer requesting money in exchange for intimate acts during a photo shoot, stating that for $300, he could do whatever he wanted. She even exchanged 80 messages with a security guard she had met in the accident and emergency department, while her daughter was fighting for her life after being resuscitated by paramedics. When police examined Louise's phone, they discovered more concerning evidence. Just 1 day before Lexi's death, she had sent a message to a man saying, "I'm just really having a tough time with my 3-year-old being ill from that deadly flu. Doctors telling me she's gonna die." No doctor had made any such statement to her. Her internet search history was equally disturbing. After Lexi was discharged from hospital on January 4th, Louise had searched for information such as, "Can you actually die if you have a blocked nose and cover your mouth with tape? How long after drowning can someone be resuscitated? Why did my 3-year-old stop breathing?" She had also visited websites with articles titled "Child Revived Almost 2 Hours After Drowning" and "5 Weird Things That Happen After You Die." Just hours before she called emergency services about Lexi, Louise had searched how long it took for a body to go cold. Louise insisted these searches were unrelated to her daughter's deaths, but the evidence continued to accumulate. In messages to various people, she expressed concern about losing Scarlett as well. Yet CCTV footage from their hotel showed that Scarlett appeared to be happy and healthy. Then on February 1st, she messaged a man named Patrick on WhatsApp. "Any chance of putting $30 in my bank now for fuel to get my daughter Scarlett to hospital? I will transfer it back Wednesday. She's not well. If you can let me know. I'm not losing another baby." Patrick replied, "Call the ambulance. Don't waste time, hon." Louise responded, "I've called, told me to make my way. Can you or not? Please, you'll get it back." Investigators believe that Louise had already harmed Scarlett in the hotel room before carrying her to the car, meaning that when she was captured on CCTV filling her car with petrol, Scarlett was likely already deceased or dying in the back seat. Louise later denied this allegation, claiming it was entirely false. In January 2019, 1 year after Lexi's death, the Crown Prosecution Service approved murder charges against Louise. She appeared in Magistrates Court in Leamington Spa, speaking only to confirm her name, date of birth, and address. She denied the charges and provided a prepared statement. "They were an inconvenience to me, and I accommodated and personal life around them. I still don't know how my daughters died or what caused it. Fact that life as a single mother is difficult, but I never asked anybody in any situation that I use my daughter's ill health or death is wholly inaccurate." As court proceedings progressed, an incident occurred. Jeffrey was reprimanded by a judge for taking a photograph of her through the courtroom. Courts is prohibited, but Jeffrey claimed he believed it would be outside the courtroom. He to show Louise's sister what she looked like, as they hadn't seen each other. The judge opted not to punish him, but through any malicious wish, and that this was just an extraordinarily stupid thing. As a warning, you've had a lucky escape. Photographs to be deleted. In July 19, Louise Porten's trial began. She maintained her innocence throughout, telling the court that her daughters always made her laugh. Loved them dearly. She added, "It's things to do, but it was something like a co-parent. They were always giving. I would take them to places, play park, them everything they wanted." When questioned and arrangements to meet men for payment, she explained, "Because at the time, from Universal Credit." Prosecutor Oliver said during the trial, "No doubt she would have needed time to herself." In the context of two unexplained deaths, consistent with obstruction, it is hard not to draw the conclusion that for the defense, times her two children got in the way of her doing what she wanted, when she wanted, and with whom she wanted. The overwhelming inference is that Lexi and feared with their breathing, that someone can only who had attended to Lexi. Fourth, testified, called to the flat again, wine in her hand. He told the court, "She said, who looked after my Lexi before she died." Medic, who had found Scarlett deceased, also testified that it was evident the child had been dead for some. Services were contacted. Louise told the court attachments and struggled to express her emotions, but no evidence to suggest she suffered from any condition that might explain. The court heard that she would raise her children in favor of messaging men on dating apps, telling some that if they funded her shopping, she would. Later told a newspaper that Louise would regularly leave her children with her father so she could. The Google searches, coupled with messages, had said her daughter might die when they had met, and her expressed concern about losing Scarlett. When he showed the child appeared fine, all contributed. The fact that she had waited hours before emergency services, depriving her children of receiving medical assistance, was particularly disturbing. 2019, at Birmingham Crown Court, following a 5 hours of deliberation, Louise Porton was unanimously. She received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Yip described Louise as evil and calculated, stating, "You squeezed the life out of each of your daughters only when you knew they were dead. I'm sure at the time of their deaths you intended so. Only you will know. Those who loved Lexi and Scarlett, and why you could have done something so evil. Children who were plainly vulnerable and ought to have been able and nurture them. Instead, the judge continued, the in the way of your lifestyle may make for interesting headlines, evidence at trial. Your daughters from doing what you wanted. This offers no real reason for Lexi and Scarlett other than that you, their mother, decided to end their lives. Her belief that when Lexi was admitted to hospital with breathing second and fourth, these symptoms were likely the result of previous attempts on her life by her mother, Chris Draper. Lexi and Scarlett's father. You were their mother, the person supposed to care for them, protect them, and love them. They were just an inconvenience to you. How could you do this? Maybe if social services had listened to me, they would. I sit and think day and night why my two little girls were taken away because I hate Louise. No punishment. Only having a short time with Lexi, Scarlett, makes it all the more heartbreaking. We will miss out on all those special occasions. First day of school, birthdays, getting married, having children of their own. Is that Lexi and Scarlett are together. Throughout the reading of Louise sat with her head resting on her hands, looking down at her visible reaction. Detective Superintendent Pete Hill from Warwickshire Police commented that why Louise murdered her children. She has lost friends, family, and professionals to cover her tracks. At no point throughout the whole investigation has she ever shown any real signs of emotion. Not content with killing one of her children, she did exactly the same to. I'd like to thank the jury. They diligently went through the appalling details they saw through her lies before returning a guilty verdict. Tom began serving her sentence at HMP Foster eligible for parole in January 2051. Reports indicate that she has been during her incarceration. In September 2019, in Walsall, their coffins were transported. Father Chris paid tribute to them online and would never be forgotten. He concluded his message, "Sleeves, Daddy's got you. Daddy will always fight. Love your daddy." Following Louise's spoke about the changes she had observed in her daughter. Something snapped in her. My wonderful little girl changed. She's not the happy, loving girl I consider her my daughter. Sharon, all services. I cannot believe social services. They have blood on their hands. They could have done so much more. Louise didn't. She didn't give a damn. There should be an inquiry into the decision that everything is okay with Louise's family and that they can be left alone, taken away for her own safety. According to Sharon, multiple people in the weeks before Lexi's death, but no action had been taken. It was reported that Sharon, age 48, had died by suicide. For West Midlands Police confirmed that officers were called discovered at an address in Willenhall, adding that between sisters is often special and enduring. Opportunity to grow up together, to share experience. They had many possibilities ahead of them. Soon. Dublin, Ireland, where the landscape opens to serene rural views and a close community in harmony. A Monday morning in early autumn was unfolding. October 4th, 2004. Just when Joe O'Reilly left the family home. An account manager at Viacom Outdoor Advertising on the Bluebell Industrial Estate. His wife of 13 years, Rachel, remained and 4 years old. Later that morning, Joe sent a message to Rachel saying, "Wish Jackie a happy birthday for me, please. Kiss, kiss, kiss." This absence of response began a sequence of events that would eventually. Between 11:52 in the morning and 1, Joe left several voicemails for Rachel. At 1:15, he received a call had not arrived at 12:30 to collect their child, which was unusual for her, and left a message asking if perhaps someone else had been scheduled to pick up their son. In another, he expressed concern and asked her to call him back. Joe then contacted his mother, explaining that he had been unable to reach Rachel all morning. To the family home to check that everything was well while he. During his drive, Joe called Rachel's phone again, mentioning with Rose, who also hadn't heard from Rachel. When she could. The family grew increasingly. Joe called Rachel's youngest brother, Anthony, to inform him of the situation. Other home phone and Rachel's mobile, but received no answer. This behavior was not characteristic. Decided to drive to her daughter's home to investigate. Upon arrival, felt a sense of relief seeing Rachel's car in the drive. The patio door stood open, but the house was silent. Drawers left open and items scattered across the floor. The living room, videos were piled in disarray. The house some manner. Rose continued to the bedroom shared by. There she discovered her daughter's body. Rachel was lying on her back in a pool of blood. He twisted. The amount of blood was significant, covering the walls, the ceiling, the bathroom. When Rose touched her daughter, she found that old. A neighbor later reported hearing Rose retrieved her phone to call emergency services, then contacted to share the devastating news. Declan and his father Jim would come to the house immediately. Joe arrived at the home around 2:30. Rose informed him that she had found Rachel's body. Seeing her, said, "Jesus, Rachel." Rachel's close friend Jackie, who was a nurse, there were no signs of life. Jim Callery arrived, but was advised by a police officer not due to the distressing nature of the scene. When the garden and mentioned that he had gone into the house, he indicated that he had moved a body into the boys' room and expressed concern of compromised evidence. In his initial statement, Joe provided an alibi that he had been at a bus depot in to make it improbable that he could have traveled to the house within the time frame of Rachel's death. This raised the question to harm Rachel and what might have been their motivation. Rachel Callery, infant, as had her 4 siblings, but the family maintained strong bonds with making time to connect with her parents and her siblings. Brothers, named Anthony Declan and Paul, named Anne. She was known for her, particularly in softball, and had even set a softball. People who knew her described Rachel as energetic. Her mother, Rose, referred to her as who had been well-behaved as a child, while and enthusiastic about trying new experiences. Her father, Jim, described her as someone willing to try anything and had a particular aptitude for home improvement. At the age of 17, Rachel met Joe O'Reilly while they both worked at the same department store. First, Rachel was 5 and Joe stood at 6 feet 5 inches. He asked her for a date several times. Declined. He persisted. After Joe attended one of her practice sessions, and both were skilled players with potential professional levels. Their relationship. During a visit to Paris, Joe at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and they married. They then welcomed 2 sons into their family. They relocated to their new home, a bungalow named Lamb area. It seemed an ideal children. Rachel embraced motherhood and her children. She became well through her sales of Avon and Tupperware products. She organized a barbecue to meet her new neighbor, a close family as well, being of 4 siblings, 2 boys and 2 girls. His early Rachel's in that his parents' marriage had dissolved when he was young. Joe was described as and determined to succeed in the advertising industry despite qualifications. His persuasive abilities with absence of credentials, his work and late departures from the office when the couple moved into their 3-bedroom bungalow, might feel isolated because Joe was frequently away from home for work. Rachel appeared pleased with the change, though Joe wished to be as family-oriented. Some of Rachel's friends observed that leaving Rachel to handle most of the on her own. Left home early to visit the gym. Late in the evening, Rachel tended to keep her, though some acquaintances sensed there might be difficulties. Detective Inspector Pat Mary, sergeant at Balbriggan Station, arrived at the scene as a qualified crime scene examiner. He entered the home to assess the situation. He later described it. My God, she was pulverized. You could see down to her skull. You could see used to inflict that, so the poor woman had no chance, absolutely none. It was savage, unbelievable. Rachel's father, Jim, intensely to protect herself, and he thought the attacker, although initial appearances suggested wrong, one detail immediately seemed inconsistent. Untaken 800 euros. 400 euros in Rachel's handbag. Based on his observations, Pat did not believe this was a random attack by a stranger. It's highly unusual to see someone having administered such a beating. The viciousness display of hate for this woman. If you hate someone, Pat concluded that the robbery scenario had likely been staged. The police established an incident room at the station and deployed more than 40 officers to conduct door-to-door inquiries and search the surrounding area for potential evidence. News of the violent crime spread through the community, causing considerable shock. From examining the crime scene, investigators believed Rachel had been completely unprepared for the attack. Searches were conducted to locate the murder weapon, but were unsuccessful. However, the searches did yield an important discovery. About half a mile from the house, a plastic bag containing jewelry and a camera was found, items Joe had reported as missing. This finding further undermined the burglary theory. Joe was questioned that evening. He stated that he had left for work as usual and had gone to the gym beforehand. Security footage showed him leaving work at 8:07 in the morning, and he claimed he was heading to a bus depot in Broadstone, where he was to meet a colleague named Derek Queerney. Part of Joe's job involved checking advertisements on buses, which required him to travel to different locations. At 8:45, Derek departed for the depot, and upon arrival, he called Joe to inquire about his whereabouts. Joe replied that he was in another section of the depot. During questioning, Detective Pat asked Joe if anyone was known to dislike Rachel, or if she might have been involved with someone else romantically. Joe's response was unexpected. He said, "No, neither of us were having an affair." This was notable because Pat had not asked whether Joe himself was having an affair, raising the question of why Joe felt it necessary to deny this unprompted. The truth eventually emerged. Joe had been unfaithful. He told Pat, "It's over now. I don't want anyone to know." He explained that he had had a brief relationship with a woman named Nikki Pelly, but insisted it had not been serious. He mentioned that he and Rachel had argued the day before her death, and he had slept in the spare room. Nikki was subsequently questioned and confirmed Joe's account, saying their relationship had not been serious. That same day, the results of Rachel's post-mortem examination became available. It revealed that she had been struck repeatedly with a heavy object, possibly a dumbbell, one of the items Joe had reported missing from the house. Her skull had been fractured in 2 places, and she had multiple lacerations on her face, shoulders, and neck. Defensive wounds on her arms indicated that she had attempted to protect herself from her attacker. The examination determined that she had been struck between 6 and 9 times. Blood found in her airways suggested she would have had significant difficulty breathing. A few days after the murder, police searched Joe's workplace office and took his laptop. They recovered a series of deleted emails. In these messages to his sister Anne, Joe expressed intense animosity toward Rachel, using vulgar language and stating that she repulsed him. When these emails became public, Rose said the family was devastated that anyone could be described in such a terrible manner. The revelation of marital problems came as a significant shock to Rose, who had previously thought he was a loner. He was very strange. I never thought, though, there was anything bad about him. I thought he was a very good husband and a very good father. At family gatherings, he would tend to break off from the adults, and nobody really knew a lot about him. The house remained cordoned off for 9 days, allowing forensic investigators to thoroughly document the scene. During this time, the family prepared for Rachel's funeral. They each wrote letters to place in her coffin. The family left Joe alone with the undertaker to say his private farewells to his wife. When one of them returned, Joe said, "You can put the lid on it now," which Rachel's father thought sounded as though Joe were referring to a box rather than his wife's coffin. Her parents found these to be unusually detached comments from someone who should have been deeply affected by grief. After the funeral, Rachel's parents received cards that had accompanied flowers. One from Joe simply stated, "See you later, Joe." His behavior continued to become increasingly unusual. When police informed him he could return to the house, he was asked to note anything he believed had been stolen. He repeated his earlier statement that some jewelry, a camera, 2 towels, and a dumbbell were missing, though the jewelry and camera had already been recovered. In what many found disturbing, Joe invited Rose and Jim to visit the house even though it had not been cleaned and still contained traces of their daughter's blood. He suggested there was a sense of peace and that visiting might be beneficial for them. Rose was reluctant to enter, but Jim thought if it helped Joe process the tragedy, it might help them as well. To their dismay, Joe began recreating the murder scene and speculating about how Rachel had been attacked, pointing to blood spatter on the ceiling and walls. He suggested the killer might have stepped over her body, cleaned up in the bathroom, while listening to Rachel struggling to breathe, and then returned to finish her off. When they went downstairs, Joe insisted they listen to the voicemails he had left for Rachel that day. Rose later said she could hear Rachel's voice in her thoughts saying, "He did it." That evening, Rose shared her suspicions with Jim, who was distraught, and asked her not to discuss this with others. He suggested that people respond to grief differently, and that Joe's calm demeanor might be a manifestation of shock. Rose recalled, "I couldn't speak to Jim about it after that because he would get so upset. But I said, I'm not going to say it to you again, but I'm just asking you to be open-minded." Joe began speaking with the media. He expressed concern that the killer might strike again and appeared on television to appeal for information. In one televised statement, he said, "Why? What? Why? Rachel. Why then? What did she do, in your opinion, to deserve this? Are you going to do it again? If you are, you know you need help. What you've done is wrong. You've taken away a very young life for no good reason. I feel I know you, because you had to kill her. You couldn't leave her alive to identify you, so it's a matter of time before you're found." Journalist Jenny Friel interviewed Joe at the house. During the interview, he asked if she wanted to see the bedroom where Rachel had been killed, which surprised her. When he pointed out where the blood had been and where Rachel was found, Jenny, who described herself as not easily disturbed, felt physically ill. Another journalist, Kieran O'Brien, visited the house 12 days after the murder and took photographs, including one of Joe in the kitchen. Joe mentioned that the police considered him a suspect, and when Kieran asked if Joe believed he was a suspect, Joe confirmed this. Kieran later said he had never experienced such an interaction throughout his career. Community members and friends called Joe to offer condolences and ask if they could assist in any way. Joe would offer to show them the crime scene and share his theories about what had happened. These tours were later referred to as the murder tours. On October 22nd, Joe appeared with Rose on The Late Late Show with Pat Kenny Ireland's premiere talk show. Joe's behavior backstage caught the attention of staff who later told Pat Mary that Joe did not seem like a grieving husband. While Rose and Jim could not even consider having tea, Joe helped himself to food and refreshments and spent much of his time on his phone. During the televised interview, when asked about the circumstances at the house, Joe responded, "I think so. Where the murder happened was in the bedroom, which is the very last room of the house, so it's the room where you're least likely to bring someone you don't know because you're cornered. My view as well would be, and again it's just my view, it's not a police theory, it's just my own personal belief, is that she knew the person, because why else would you kill her? If it's a violent robbery, why go to the extreme of murdering the person unless they can identify you?" The program had offered to provide hotel accommodation for Joe, but he declined, saying he needed to meet with a client. This proved to be untrue. Instead, he visited Nikki Pelly. He had appeared on television to appeal for information about his wife's murder, and then spent the evening with the woman with whom he had been having an affair. When news of the affair became public, interest in the case intensified. Journalist Jenny Friel, reviewing her notes from her interview with Joe, realized he had not mentioned loving his wife or how much he would miss her. He had discussed the children's distress, but had not expressed his own feelings about Rachel's death. Despite efforts by Joe and Nikki to minimize their relationship, it became evident that they had been involved in a long-term affair. They had met while working at the Viacom advertising agency. After an evening at a pub, they had exchanged email addresses and phone numbers. Joe would tell Rachel he was traveling for work when he was actually visiting Nikki. They communicated daily by phone and met twice weekly, all while Joe consistently denied any affair when Rachel questioned him. 6 weeks after Rachel's murder, police made 2 arrests. Nikki Pelly was taken into custody for withholding information and Derek, the colleague who had provided Joe's alibi, was also arrested. During his interview, Derek acknowledged that his timing estimates might have been off by as much as 40 minutes. Nikki revised her earlier statement, admitting that her relationship with Joe had been more serious than she had initially indicated, and that Joe had asked her to downplay this when speaking to the police. Both were released without charges. The following day, Joe O'Reilly was arrested. He declined to answer questions during the interview. Without a murder weapon or conclusive forensic evidence, and with only CCTV footage showing a car similar to his in the area at the time, though the license plate was not visible, police released him without charge after 2 days. Rachel's family then requested that police examine the letter Joe had placed in her coffin, believing it might contain incriminating information. Authorities obtained an exhumation order, and on March 8, 2005, Rachel's body was exhumed and Joe's letter was removed. Using chemical treatment and infrared technology, investigators were able to read the contents. The 5-page letter included the passage, "Rachel, I love you so very, very much. I cannot think what I will ever do without you, and I don't want to think. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and you will never be replaced. This is the hardest letter I've ever had to write for reasons only we know. Rachel, please forgive me 2 words, 1 sentence, but I will say them forever." The note was considered ambiguous and insufficient for another arrest, though for Rachel's family, it reinforced their belief in Joe's guilt. In December 2005, 14 months after the murder, police continued building their case. The car spotted in the CCTV footage appeared to match Joe's blue Fiat Maria, but enhancements still did not clearly show the license plate. Investigators developed a strategy to demonstrate that it was likely Joe's vehicle. They searched records for all Fiat Maria owners in Ireland, finding 2,500 matches. While they could not eliminate every driver of that model in the country, they were able to rule out enough to increase the probability that the car belonged to Joe. Police also contacted O2 to inquire about recordings of calls Joe had made on the day of the murder. While these recordings were not available, they received something potentially more valuable. An engineer from France was able to determine which mobile phone masts Joe's phone had connected to throughout the day, allowing them to map his movements. This additional data became increasingly incriminating. The detailed analysis of Joe's movements on October 4th revealed significant inconsistencies in his account. At 5:45 that morning, Joe had left to go to the gym on the outskirts of the city where he was scheduled to meet Derek. He stopped at a petrol station to fill his Fiat Maria. While there, he received a call from Nikki, the first of 8 calls that day, and they spoke for 28 minutes, a detail he had not mentioned previously. After visiting the gym and showering, he proceeded to work. He sent an email to a colleague named Kieran, stating that his phone would be unavailable for most of the morning and arranged to meet him at 2:00 in the afternoon. Despite telling Derek he was in another part of the depot, analysis of Joe's phone showed he had actually been traveling toward his family home. While in that area, Joe did not make any calls or send texts, but he received a call from Derek at 9:25 and a text from another colleague at 9:52. At those times, his phone connected to a tower at Murphy's Quarry, the nearest mast to the house visible from the property. A car believed to be Joe's was captured on CCTV passing the quarry. This raised a crucial question. If Joe was at Broadstone, as he had claimed, why was his phone connecting to a mast less than a mile from his home, given that Joe had emphasized He always kept his phone with him. At 9:59, the car was seen again on camera at the quarry, this time moving away from the house. Only after this did the phone's location match Broadstone, where Joe claimed to have been all morning. At 9:00, Rachel had left with the two boys to take them to the child care center and school. 3 minutes later, CCTV recorded her passing the quarry. The same camera showed her returning at 9:41, and investigators believed she was killed shortly after arriving home. When the text asking if she had slept well was sent to Rachel, police checked the time on the CCTV cameras, which also captured a blue Fiat Maria being driven 10 minutes after the text was sent. They drove the route from where the text originated to the CCTV camera and found it took approximately 10 minutes. Joe returned to the office around 12:00. Upon his arrival, a colleague noticed that he appeared flushed and red-faced, as though he had been crying. She asked if everything was all right, and he said it was. When she commented that he looked unwell, he appeared alarmed and hurried to his office. He remained there until he received the call informing him that Rachel had not collected their son from the child care center. After Nikki was released without charge, it emerged that she had told a friend it was difficult to continue lying to the police. Nikki had revealed to her friend that Joe had once said if he killed Rachel, he could avoid consequences. Nikki was questioned again and admitted Joe had made this statement, though she claimed she had not taken it seriously. Police later discovered that Rachel had told a friend about a significant argument with Joe, during which she had told him he needed to change his behavior or leave. It also came to light that just 4 months before Rachel's death, social services had received an anonymous report alleging that Rachel was unfit to be a mother, claims that were determined to be completely unfounded. Joe and his sister Anne had exchanged emails about this incident, with Anne using offensive language to refer to Rachel and asking how she had managed to address the situation. Joe responded that social services had confirmed what he had suspected. If they divorced, he would likely not receive full custody and would be unable to exclude Rachel from their children's lives. In March 2006, Derek Queerney was brought in for further questioning. During one interview, Derek became physically ill from stress and vomited into a waste bin. He then stated that his previous statement could not have been accurate and that his timing estimates might be incorrect. Based on this development, Joe was arrested a second time. Pat Mary was hopeful that the combined evidence phone analysis CCTV footage and the elimination of other Fiat Maria drivers would be sufficient for charges, but the Director of Public Prosecutions indicated they needed more. Joe was released again. Pat recalled how Joe gave him a thumbs-up gesture while leaving, appearing unconcerned about the situation or what had occurred. On the second anniversary of Rachel's death, her family held a memorial mass outside Lambay View. Neither the children nor Joe attended. Further analysis of mobile phone data provided additional incriminating evidence. Joe's phone had connected to a mast near the family home at the time of Rachel's murder, contradicting his statement that he had been miles away at the bus depot. In October 2006, police arrived at Joe's mother's house to arrest him. Pat Mary approached Joe in the kitchen, placed a hand on his shoulder, and informed him he was under arrest for Rachel's murder. Pat recalled, "He turned and faced me. The blood drained from his face, and he went white as a sheet. He was not expecting it." On June 25, 2007, Joe O'Reilly's trial began. Public interest was unprecedented, with queues forming daily as people attempted to gain access to the courtroom. Rachel's family had not seen Joe for 8 months, making their courtroom encounter particularly difficult. Jim described Joe as displaying a fierce arrogance, while Rose found him detached. The defense argued that the prosecution had based their case on innuendo spin and allegation, claiming it was merely circumstantial. However, the evidence phone records, emails disparaging his wife, his misrepresentations about his whereabouts, his minimization of the affair, and his behavior afterward created a compelling case against him. The emails and texts between Nikki and Joe presented to the court revealed their plans to start a life together. Joe often told Nikki he loved her and would refer to one of his sons as "our boy," suggesting a motive for wanting Rachel removed from his life. He had attempted to damage Rachel's reputation, calling her lazy and harsh with the children. The court was also surprised to learn that the person who had made the unfounded anonymous report to social services was Joe's mother. Throughout the trial, Joe kept his gaze lowered, showing no emotion. On the rare occasions when he looked up, it was to communicate with his lawyers, sometimes laughing during these exchanges. The prosecution presented their theory of the crime at 9:45. Rachel had returned home, and Joe, who had been waiting in the bedroom, attacked her. After beating her, he showered to remove blood, then placed his clothes and towels in the washing machine. He attempted to stage a break-in, then deposited the supposedly stolen items in a bag near a stream. When contacted about Rachel not picking up their son, Joe deliberately delayed ensuring Rose would discover her daughter's body. Professor Marie Cassidy Ireland's state pathologist testified that Joe's reenactment of the murder, including details about the killer hearing Rachel struggling to breathe before striking her again, aligned with the medical evidence. The court also heard from Fiona Slevin about a conversation with Joe on the day of Rachel's funeral. She testified that he had told her, "I don't know why they're looking in the fields. The murder weapon is in the water." She added that it seemed as though he had spoken inadvertently. He then said, "Well, if I did it, that's where it would be. There's water all around that would get rid of all the DNA." On the 11th day of the trial, the phone data analysis was presented showing how Joe's phone had been tracked to the vicinity of his house when he claimed to be at the bus depot. This evidence was groundbreaking, marking the first time mobile phone triangulation had been used so extensively in a murder trial. 2 days later, the emails between Joe and his sister containing derogatory comments about Rachel were read to the court, causing visible distress to Rachel's mother and sister. On the 14th day, Nikki Pelly testified, stating that she and Joe had discussed a permanent future together. She explained that when first interviewed, she had downplayed their relationship because Joe had instructed her to do so, saying that if she characterized it as a serious relationship, it would suggest he had a motive to kill Rachel. Joe's approach to the media was presented as evidence of his attempt to control the narrative. He had convinced Rose to appear on The Late Late Show by claiming the police thought it was advisable, when in fact they had instructed him to avoid further media engagement. One of Rachel's brothers later commented he liked that feeling. He enjoyed people's reactions. "In my head, it's not human, not normal, but that's the way he is. I honestly believe he is a psychopath." On July 21, 2007, the jury delivered their verdict at the Central Criminal Court. Joe O'Reilly was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The courtroom responded with emotional outbursts, cheers, applause, and tears from the Callery family. Outside the court, Rose expressed gratitude. "We'd love to thank everybody, the police in particular. They have been so brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and the prosecution team and all the people of Ireland that have been behind us with cards, letters, prayers. It all meant so much to us. And at long last, we've got justice for our darling Rachel." Joe O'Reilly pursued appeals through the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, both of which were unsuccessful. He reportedly abandoned plans to take his case to European courts. In May 2015, his appeal to have his conviction declared a miscarriage of justice was denied. He has been refused parole at least 3 times, with Rachel's family consistently advocating to ensure he remains in prison. In 2012, Joe's brother Derek maintained his belief in Joe's innocence, stating, "The Joe I know was not a scumbag. He is most definitely not a wife-beater, and he most definitely isn't a devil. The Joe O'Reilly I know is anything but the ultimate evil. I've never had any reason to doubt him." Nikki Pelly continued to visit Joe weekly in prison, also believing in his innocence. Reports from 2022 indicated that Joe and Nikki had ended their relationship for a second time, with the first separation occurring in 2017, though sources suggested they remained close friends. The Callery family faced additional tragedy when in 2010, Rose and Jim's other daughter, Anne, passed away at age 31 after battling cancer. This occurred just 2 weeks before the anniversary of Rachel's death. Rose described how deeply Anne had been affected by her sister's death. "As soon as our Rachel died, our Anne used to arrive up at the door at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. She was petrified, and she was afraid of him. She never rested. She always thought she could hear noises, someone trying to get in." For those who remained adjusting to life after Rachel's murder has been challenging. Rose published a book titled Remembering Rachel, the story of Rachel O'Reilly's life and brutal death. She explained, "I don't want anyone to ever forget what was done to Rachel in any shape or form." Perhaps the most fitting reflection comes from Rose's words about her daughter's memory. "I'd love her to be remembered as this bubbly person that we had for such a short time that touched everybody's hearts. I wish I could go back. I'd give anything to be able to hold her, even just for 1 minute." For those who prefer listening while traveling, these episodes are available in podcast form. They can be accessed through the link in our description or by searching for Truly Criminal Podcast on your preferred podcasting platforms. On a warm Sunday afternoon in December 2003, the peaceful suburb of Palm Woods on Australia's Sunshine Coast became the starting point of what would develop into one of the country's most extensive missing persons investigations. The events that unfolded would ultimately transform child safety awareness across the nation, though they began in the most ordinary of circumstances. The Morecombe family home in Palm Woods, Queensland, was a place of simple pleasures and close family bonds. Bruce and Denise Morecombe were parents to 3 boys, twins Daniel and Bradley, and their older brother Dean. The family enjoyed an uncomplicated lifestyle surrounded by the natural beauty of Australia's Sunshine Coast. Daniel James Morecombe was described by his father as a shy young boy around strangers, but energetic and enthusiastic with his family. He was well-mannered, reliable, and had an affinity for animals and outdoor activities. His dream was to become a veterinarian someday. Daniel possessed a generous spirit and genuine concern for others, traits his parents deeply admired. On December 7th, 2003, 13-year-old Daniel had planned a shopping trip to the Sunshine Plaza Shopping Center. His intention was to purchase Christmas presents for his family and get a haircut. Before leaving, Daniel had asked both his brothers to accompany him, but each had other commitments and declined. This ordinary decision would later weigh heavily on their minds. Daniel set off alone, walking to a bus stop located just half a kilometer from his home. The bus route was one he had taken many times before in an area he knew intimately. He was expected to catch the 1:35 p.m. bus, but that vehicle had experienced mechanical issues. At approximately 2:10 p.m., witnesses observed Daniel still waiting patiently beneath the overpass. Eventually, a replacement bus drove past, but did not stop for Daniel as it was already behind schedule. The driver radioed the depot to arrange for another driver to collect the waiting passenger. When a second bus arrived a few minutes later, the bus stop was empty. Daniel Morecambe had vanished. As afternoon transitioned into evening on that December day, concern began to grow within the Morecambe household. Around 4:15 p.m., Daniel's family realized he should have returned hours earlier. His brothers confirmed they had been out with friends and had not seen him. Denise Morecambe decided to walk the route to the bus stop herself. During her search, she discovered the broken-down bus being loaded onto a tow truck, but there was no sign of her son. Upon contacting the bus company, they confirmed that no one matching Daniel's description had been picked up that day. The following morning, just after 7:30 a.m., police were formally notified of Daniel's disappearance. Soon after, the first images of the young teenager began appearing in media outlets. A coordinated search effort quickly formed with approximately 50 state emergency service volunteers and rescue helicopters scouring the surrounding area, though nothing of significance was discovered. The search expanded to include waterways and dams, with police divers examining bodies of water, while volunteers searched through grasslands. The community response was overwhelming, with hundreds of people offering assistance and support. Daniel's parents and brothers joined nearly 400 people at a vigil. Bruce and Denise Morecambe soon became familiar faces in the media, consistently appealing for information and ensuring Daniel's image and details were widely distributed. December 19th marked a particularly difficult milestone for the family. Daniel's 14th birthday passed without him present. Authorities organized a reenactment of the events leading to Daniel's disappearance, hoping to stimulate the memories of motorists who might have traveled along that road on the day he vanished. As days turned into weeks, his parents' public appeals grew more urgent. "We both want Daniel home," they expressed during one media appearance. "It's been 7 days since he was last seen. It's a matter of urgency. Somebody must have seen him somewhere. It's getting desperate. We need him back. We want Daniel back." Several witnesses came forward with recollections of seeing Daniel at the bus stop on that December afternoon. Some reported observing him drawing patterns in the mud with a stick to occupy himself while waiting. Others described seeing him standing near a man who was leaning against a wall behind the bus stop. This individual was depicted as gaunt in appearance with a goatee beard and visible tattoo. Multiple witnesses corroborated this description. By carefully assembling the various time frames provided by witnesses, investigators determined that Daniel's disappearance had occurred within an extraordinarily brief 90-second window. To generate additional leads, authorities placed life-sized clay models at the location, one representing Daniel and another portraying the unidentified man seen near him. This visual reconstruction proved effective, generating over 300 tips within just a few days. Among these reports were accounts of a suspicious white vehicle seen circulating in the area that afternoon. By March 2004, Crime Stoppers had logged more than 3,000 calls related to the case, the highest number for any investigation in the organization's history. The following months saw numerous community events organized to maintain awareness. Over 50 printing companies collaborated to produce nearly 2 million informational leaflets about Daniel. His image was also printed on milk bottles distributed throughout the region. By October of that year, the number of tips received had reached 8,000, and authorities announced a $250,000 reward, the largest in Queensland's history. In 2005, Bruce and Denise established the Daniel Morecombe Foundation. Initially conceived as a means to maintain attention on their son's case, the foundation evolved to provide support and educational resources for parents, educators, and caregivers, promoting awareness about child safety. As months transformed into years, Daniel's story continued to receive media coverage, and the foundation worked diligently to keep his name in public consciousness. Despite the nearly 10,000 tips collected, investigators still lacked sufficient evidence to resolve the case. At one point, more than 500 persons of interest were under consideration. 4 years after Daniel's disappearance, the Morecombe family made the difficult decision to relocate from their home. Until that time, Daniel's possessions had remained untouched, exactly as he had left them on that December day, preserved in the hope he might someday return. Bruce and Denise Morecombe persistently followed every potential lead, regardless of where it might take them. Bruce even initiated his own investigative efforts, interviewing registered sex offenders in the area who claimed to possess relevant information, though these inquiries yielded nothing substantive. As time passed, there was growing concern that Daniel's case might never be resolved. However, his parents remained determined. They requested an inquest into his disappearance, hoping that the extensive list of persons of interest would receive renewed scrutiny. The inquest was approved and included testimony from the bus driver, who had initially passed by Daniel witnesses who had observed the unidentified man near the bus stop, and numerous persons of interest. Thousands of pages of investigative materials were submitted to the state coroner. By this time, authorities had concluded that Daniel had likely been killed shortly after his abduction, and the search had shifted toward locating his remains. Among those called to testify under oath was 41-year-old Brett Peter Cowan. Cowan had been known to police and had been under consideration since the initial stages of the investigation. He had been interviewed just 2 weeks after Daniel's disappearance, and investigators acknowledged there were inconsistencies in his alibi from the beginning. During his testimony, Cowan provided an account of his activities on December 7, 2003. He claimed to have been gardening that morning and cutting down trees in the afternoon. Around lunchtime, he said he had contacted his employer's father to borrow equipment, then collected it around 1:30 p.m. and returned home approximately 45 minutes later. When questioned about the possibility that he hadn't arrived home until 3:00 p.m., creating a gap in his timeline, Cowan appeared evasive. The most disturbing aspect of Cowan's testimony emerged when he stated that there was no possibility he could have abducted Daniel because his preference was for children between 6 and 8 years old, suggesting Daniel at 13 was too old for him. As the inquest proceeded, Cowan's previous criminal history was revealed. In 1987, when Cowan was 18 years old, he had assaulted a 7-year-old boy named Tim at a daycare center where Cowan worked. After attempting to lure the child into a bathroom and being refused, Cowan forcibly took Tim into a cubicle and subjected him to a serious sexual assault. During the attack, Cowan strangled the boy and threatened to kill him if he ever disclosed what had happened. The assault only ended when another staff member called out for Tim. Tim later expressed that while he had physically survived the ordeal, he felt that Cowan had nevertheless taken his life that day. Following his arrest for this assault, Cowan was granted bail, but fled remaining at large for 2 years before being apprehended in New South Wales. During the subsequent trial, Tim courageously testified against his attacker and recalled that Cowan maintained a smile throughout the proceedings as though treating the entire matter as some form of amusement. Cowan received a 2-year sentence, but served less than 12 months before being released. After his release, Cowan relocated to Darwin, presenting himself as a Reformed Christian who had found religious faith. However, not long afterward, he attacked another child, a 6-year-old whom he abducted from a trailer park. After assaulting the child, Cowan left him in the trunk of a burned-out vehicle, apparently assuming he would not survive. Remarkably, the young victim managed to escape and make his way to a nearby service station. The child had suffered a broken collarbone, a punctured lung, and hemorrhaging in his eyes from attempted suffocation. Cowan was eventually apprehended and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment, of which he served 4. Psychological assessments of Cowan identified him as a pathological liar, with mild psychopathy and a profound lack of empathy. The severity of his crimes against children and the trauma they caused suggested that recidivism was likely. At the conclusion of his testimony regarding Daniel's disappearance, Cowan looked directly at Bruce and Denise Morecombe and stated, "I had nothing to do with Daniel's disappearance, nothing at all." Following Cowan's testimony, and with a new task force assembled, the investigation took a decisive turn. Authorities initiated an extensive undercover operation that would continue for 4 months, designed to determine whether Cowan was responsible for Daniel's abduction and presumed death. The investigation employed what is known as the Mr. Big technique, a complex strategy involving the creation of a fictitious criminal organization using undercover officers. The objective was to gradually integrate the suspect into this fabricated criminal network. As the suspect believes they are advancing within the organization's hierarchy, they eventually meet Mr. Big, ostensibly the leader of the group, but actually a police interrogator. During this meeting, the suspect is typically offered a higher position contingent upon passing an interview, during which they are encouraged to disclose their past activities. An undercover officer, posing as a member of this fictional criminal group, befriended Cowan while on a flight to Perth, marking the beginning of the operation. The officer mentioned connections to a powerful criminal organization and suggested substantial financial opportunities, which immediately captured Cowan's interest. Over the subsequent months, Cowan was gradually integrated into the group's activities, participating in simulated drug transactions, collecting fictitious debts, and handling counterfeit weapons. Eventually, Cowan was informed that the organization's leadership considered him ready to meet the person in charge. This meeting took place in a hotel room equipped with recording devices. The undercover officer, an experienced interrogator, began a conversation with Cowan. Surprisingly, Cowan began to disclose information relatively quickly. The officer expressed concern about rumors regarding Cowan's involvement in the Daniel Morecombe case, suggesting that while this did not personally trouble him, he needed to understand what measures might be necessary to protect the organization, such as arranging alibis or removing evidence. Cowan then provided a detailed confession. He described seeing Daniel waiting at the bus stop and making a circular drive around the area. Noticing a broken-down bus nearby, Cowan realized Daniel would not be picked up soon. He parked his vehicle in a nearby lot, then positioned himself behind Daniel, pretending to also be waiting for transportation. While monitoring the surroundings to ensure minimal witnesses, Cowan saw his opportunity when the replacement bus passed without stopping. According to his confession, Cowan drove Daniel approximately 30 minutes away to an isolated property. Daniel's parents later reflected that their son must have recognized the seriousness of his situation as the surroundings became increasingly remote and unfamiliar. Cowan stated that after taking Daniel into a house on the property, the boy became frightened and attempted to escape. Cowan then strangled him. Based on this account and expert opinions, investigators concluded that Daniel had been killed within an hour of his abduction. Afterward, Cowan disposed of the body down an embankment and discarded the clothing in a creek. Following Cowan's confession, the undercover operatives convinced him to show them the location where he had disposed of Daniel's body, suggesting they could help remove any remaining evidence. They traveled to a wooded area 70 kilometers north of Brisbane, with police officers concealed nearby. As Cowan ventured deeper into the woodland, officers emerged and placed him under arrest for the murder of Daniel Morecombe. Cowan was taken into custody and charged with murder, abduction, deprivation of liberty, indecent treatment of a child under 16, and interfering with human remains. A week later in the area, Cowan had identified, investigators discovered a shoe. This was followed by the recovery of shorts, a belt, and damaged underwear. Eventually, 3 human bones were located. DNA comparison with samples from Daniel's toothbrush confirmed these remains belonged to Daniel Morecombe. The search of the area continued for 3 months, ultimately yielding 17 bones in total. It would be approximately 1 year before Daniel's remains were released to his family for burial, almost 9 years after his disappearance. More than 2,000 people attended his funeral, demonstrating the community's enduring support for the family. The investigation into Daniel's disappearance had become one of the most extensively pursued criminal cases in Queensland's history, and its conclusion brought a measure of resolution, albeit under tragic circumstances. A court order removed the name suppression that had previously concealed Cowan's identity following a request from Daniel's parents. Bruce Morecombe later reflected that once Cowan was arrested, the circumstances became clearer. I felt he was a remarkably simple person to identify, and this was a simple puzzle to solve, Bruce observed. He had a huge hole in his alibi and a disgraceful record. Brett Peter Cowan pleaded not guilty to all charges related to Daniel Morecombe's abduction and death. The trial lasted 1 month and included testimony from 116 witnesses with more than 200 exhibits presented as evidence. Cowan chose not to testify in his own defense. On March 14, 2014, more than a decade after Daniel's disappearance, the jury delivered its verdict. Cowan was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 20 years. He displayed no emotional reaction as the verdict was announced. This judgment concluded what had become the largest police investigation in Queensland's history, and at that time, the most extensive missing persons case in Australia. Denise Morcombe later shared that as the verdict was delivered, she recalled the promise she had made to her son that she would secure justice for him, and she felt profound relief that this commitment had been fulfilled. She added that as a family, they valued keeping their promises, and her first wish afterward was to visit Daniel's resting place to inform him they had not failed him. Cowan subsequently attempted to appeal his conviction, but this request was denied. He remains incarcerated at Woolston Correctional Center, where he has reportedly experienced several physical attacks from other inmates. According to prison sources, Cowan maintains respectful behavior towards staff, though this is attributed to his understanding that officers represent his only protection from other prisoners. Following Cowan's sentencing, Denise Morcombe expressed that she finally felt able to process Daniel's belongings and address emotions she had compartmentalized for many years. The case profoundly influenced child safety practices throughout Australia, and the dedication shown by Daniel's family inspired many across the nation. The Daniel Morcombe Foundation, established by Bruce and Denise, has evolved into one of Australia's most recognized non-profit organizations dedicated to child safety. Bruce and Denise view the foundation as a way to reciprocate the support they received from the community during their search for answers. Each year, thousands of people wear red clothing, the color Daniel was last seen wearing, during an annual National Day of Action for Child Safety. This event, known as Day for Daniel, is held on the last Friday of October and represents Australia's largest educational initiative for child safety awareness and conversation. The day begins with a 4-kilometer walk symbolizing the journey home that Daniel was unable to complete. Parents, caregivers, and educators are encouraged to discuss personal safety with children and young people. Schools' early learning centers, businesses, and communities participate in activities to raise awareness. Bruce and Denise also met with Tim Cowan's first known victim to assure him that Cowan would never harm another person. Daniel's twin brother Bradley honored his memory at his wedding, with his older brother Dean serving as best man, carrying photographs of Daniel so he could be symbolically present. Bradley later welcomed a son whose middle name is Daniel. Dean also had a daughter, coincidentally born on the same day that Day for Daniel was observed. The Morcombe family continues to reserve a seat for Daniel at their Christmas table each year, with his photograph placed beside his chair. Through these gestures and through the Foundation's ongoing work, they ensure that Daniel's memory endures and that his name continues to be associated with helping others. The story of Daniel Morcombe remains a testament to a family's unwavering commitment to truth and justice, and to a community's capacity to support those experiencing profound loss. Through their dedication, Daniel's legacy has transcended tragedy to become a catalyst for positive change in child safety awareness across Australia.